Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third edition of the Hidden Figures podcast. Today, I'm really excited to have someone here with me today called Anderson Walsh. He's the pastor at my church. He's done a lot of fantastic things in his life. You know what, actually, it's probably better if I ask you, Paul, just in terms of from a career perspective. We'll kind of get into your life in a moment, but just from a career perspective, what is it you do? And then we'll kind of start digging into.
Sure, with pleasure. Well, first and foremost, thank you very much for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
It's all right.
It's really nice to be with you. So, at a professional level now, what I do is I'm the founder and director of an organisation called the Centre for Inclusive Leadership. And our interest as a business is that what we do is we are interested in an inclusive society. And the way that we try and achieve that is by helping organisations, and they could be governments, they could be banks, they could be all sorts of different people, but helping them to create environments in which people can be their best self and do their best work. So that's the kind of thing we're interested in, and we work in education, government, policing, all sorts of different places on that very theme.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so obviously I know you to some extent.
Sure.
And I know you've had a very, I don't know what the best term is, tumultuous? I don't know.
Exotic.
Exotic. Let's call it exotic. Had a very exotic life. So if you don't mind, we're going to start off just talking about your childhood.
Sure.
And then kind of work our way to the now from then. So I understand that you grew up in Surrey with a number of brothers and sisters. If you could just tell us about what it was like your childhood in Surrey, and then I'll kind of start digging from there.
Sure. Would it be interesting to you to know how I got to Surrey? Yeah.
You tell your story.
Because it's interesting because it's funny to think of me, having a childhood that begins in Surrey, because actually my childhood begins right here in Ladbroke Grove. This is where I was born.
Oh wow. Okay.
So this is literally round the corner from here.
Okay.
And so I'm born in 1960. And the period in which I was born in was an interesting period to be born. So I'm mixed race. I'm Caribbean Irish. And so literally at the time I was born, there was all sorts of mayhem and craziness going on. The Notting Hill riots. And of course we had the Teddy Boys from Latimer Road, which is just down there, were coming down to where I was, and just on the Grove. And it was interesting because as well at that time there was a massive issue for the migrant communities. Of course the Caribbean diaspora and then of course the Irish diaspora were coming together, and you know of course the history as well as I do. These were the era when we had the signs in the windows, no blacks, no dogs, and no Irish. Yep. And I've often said, Emily, that actually I think that the mixed race children of that generation were the dogs that the blacks and the Irish had, because nobody knew what to do with us. It was one thing being black, it was another thing being Irish, but to be both, that just wasn't cool. So although it's really cool now, it wasn't cool then. So what happened was that my mother, who was the Irish lady, she had had a child earlier than me. So she had I have a brother called Stephen, who's 18 months my senior, and he had gone into care across the road at a place called in St Charles Square, which is just literally across the road. And at the bottom of St Charles Square is a Catholic organisation called the Crusade of Rescue. I think they call it was when I was a child, it was called the Crusade of Rescue for Destitute Children, and now it's called the Catholic something or other. Anyway, so my brother went there, and then when I came along, my mother, this doesn't entirely make sense, but this is what actually happened. So my mother she had met somebody else and they were going to get married, and she told the guy that she had a son, but unfortunately she told the guy that the son she had was my brother and not me. So this will amuse you for history, on the 23rd of March she wanders down in 1960, she wanders down to the Crusade of Rescue and she says, can I swap the children? I gave you this one 18 months ago. Can I take him back and give you this new one? So they said, well, I guess so. We've never had that request before, but I guess so. So they swapped me out, and I went into the orphanage, and my brother went off with my mother, and she remarried and went off to wherever she went off to. Yeah. So I'm now, about a month or 6 weeks old. And in those days, they used to have these little magazines they used to create, and they used to send them around to all the potential foster parents. And it was literally like a kind of, I don't know, it's like a catalogue with a little baby, a little picture, a little description. And I got picked up by a family in Surrey, which is where your story wants to start. Got picked up by a family in Surrey, and a wet and windy March night, so the story goes. I arrived in a little place called Addlestone in Surrey at 6 o'clock one night, and at 6 weeks old, and remained there, frankly, blissfully unaware that I was different from everybody in the house
Yeah.
until my world caved in 1969.